My life shattered when I found out my wife was with my brother. It started innocently enough, a late-night conversation that I probably should have paid more attention to. My wife, Emily, was texting someone, laughing quietly to herself as we sat in the living room. I asked who it was, and she casually brushed it off, saying it was a friend from work. I believed her, of course. Why wouldn't I? Emily had always been the most trustworthy person in my life. But looking back now, I realized that was the first crack in the foundation. A few weeks later, my brother, David, came over for dinner. We had always been close, growing up almost like best friends rather than just siblings. David was charming, successful, and had a natural way of winning people over. Emily had always liked him, but I never thought anything of it. He was my brother, after all. We were family. That night, though, something felt different. The way Emily looked at him during dinner, the way they shared little inside jokes that I didn't seem to be in on, it was subtle, but enough to make me feel uneasy. I brushed it off as paranoia. I told myself I was overthinking things. But as the weeks went on, those moments kept adding up. One evening, I came home earlier than usual from work. Emily wasn't expecting me, and as I opened the front door, I could hear hushed voices coming from the living room. I stepped quietly inside, and that's when I saw it, my wife sitting too close to my brother on the couch, their hands touching in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. They jumped apart the second they saw me, but the damage was done. The look on their faces said it all. I didn't say anything at first. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I had just witnessed. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for years, was betraying me with my own brother. The two people I thought I could always count on had been carrying on this secret right under my nose. Emily started to explain, stumbling over her words, but I couldn't hear her. The anger, the hurt, it was all too much. David sat there, silent, avoiding my eyes. The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with tension and unspoken truths. I turned around and walked out the door, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get away, to think, to figure out how everything had come to this. How had I missed the signs? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, why? Why would they do this to me? As I drove aimlessly through the night, the pain settled in like a weight I couldn't shake. My entire life felt like a lie. The woman I had built a future with and the brother I had grown up with had shattered everything. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. And I had no idea what to do next. That night marked the beginning of the darkest chapter in my life, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. After discovering the truth, I spent that first night away from home, driving in circles with no destination in mind. My mind was racing, consumed with disbelief, betrayal, and fury. How could Emily and David, the two people I trusted most, do this to me? My heart ached, and it felt like my entire world had crumbled in a matter of seconds. By morning, I still had no answers, only a gut-wrenching sense of loss. But I knew I couldn't run forever. I had to confront them both. I drove back to the house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to prepare myself for the inevitable. The drive felt like an eternity, each passing minute only amplifying the pit in my stomach. When I arrived, Emily was already waiting for me. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. She looked terrified, but so was I. I could barely contain the rage boiling beneath the surface as I walked into the house, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed through the hall, as if announcing the end of everything we had built together. "Let me explain," Emily started, her voice shaky, but I cut her off immediately. "Explain?" I said, my voice rising. "How do you even begin to explain something like this? You betrayed me with my own brother." Emily flinched at the anger in my voice, but she didn't back down. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Go this far?" I spat, incredulous. "How long, Emily? How long has this been going on?" There was a long pause, the silence between us deafening. Emily looked down, guilt evident in her expression. "A few months," she whispered. "A few months." I repeated, my voice barely a whisper now, disbelief washing over me. "I trusted you, both of you." "I know, and I'm sorry, so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It was a mistake. I love you, not him." I was confused, and David. "David," I interrupted. "Where is he?" "I told him not to come," Emily said quickly. "He wanted to, but I thought it would be better if we talked alone." I couldn't even process that. My mind was in overdrive, emotions I couldn't control swirling inside me. I needed to confront him, too, to hear it from his mouth, but for now, I was stuck here with Emily. The woman who had stood by my side, who had promised to love and honor me, had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. I couldn't wrap my head around it. "So what now?" I asked bitterly. "You just expect me to forgive you? Forget it ever happened?" Emily shook her head, sobbing. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'm asking for. I want to fix this. Please. I still love you. Her words felt hollow, like they didn't even belong to her anymore. How could she love me and still do something so cruel? I couldn't comprehend it. My mind was a battlefield between the love I once had for her and the rage now consuming me. I need space, I finally said, my voice cold. I can't look at you right now. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving Emily sobbing behind me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not with her. Not in that house. Everything felt tainted, like the life I had known had been erased and replaced with a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I needed to face David. I needed answers. Because if there was one thing I knew, it was that this betrayal wasn't just about Emily. My own brother had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and I had no idea what the hell I was going to do about it. But I was going to find out. I couldn't avoid David forever. As much as I wanted to cut him out of my life completely, I knew I needed to confront him. We had grown up together, shared every major moment of our lives, and now he was the reason my marriage was falling apart. The weight of his betrayal felt even heavier than Emily's. I could hardly wrap my mind around how someone who was supposed to protect me could be the one to twist the knife so deeply. The following day, I made the call. I didn't want to, but I needed to hear his side, even if it tore me apart. He answered on the first ring, his voice tentative, almost nervous. "We need to talk," I said, my tone cold. "I know," David replied quietly. "I'm so sorry. I've been waiting for you to call. When do you want to meet?" I didn't want to drag this out any longer. "Now," I said, before I could change my mind. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the next town over. Neutral territory, I figured. Somewhere public, where things couldn't escalate, at least, that's what I told myself. When I arrived, David was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking as though he hadn't slept in days. His usually confident demeanor was gone, replaced by guilt and shame. I sat across from him, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other, the weight of what had happened hanging between us like a thick, suffocating fog. "Why?" I asked finally, breaking the silence. My voice was calm, but the fury was bubbling just beneath the surface. "Why would you do this to me?" David swallowed hard, looking down at his hands. "I don't know," he muttered. I wasn't thinking. It just happened. I never meant for it to go this far, Jake." "That's not an answer," I snapped, my patience thin. "You're my brother. You're supposed to have my back, not stab me in it. How long has this been going on?" He hesitated, but I wasn't letting him off the hook. "Tell me," I demanded, my voice rising. "About 6 months," he admitted, shame coloring his voice. "It started after that family party. We were drinking, and I don't know, man, it just happened." 6 months? I repeated, barely able to process what I was hearing. 6 months of lying to my face. 6 months of pretending everything was fine while you slept with my wife." David's face twisted in pain. I know, I'm a piece of shit. I hate myself for it, Jake, but I don't know how to fix this. I wish I could take it back." "Take it back?" I leaned forward, my fists clenched under the table. "You think saying sorry is going to fix this? You've destroyed my marriage. You've destroyed our family. How do you even begin to make up for that?" David didn't have an answer. He just sat there, looking like a shell of the brother I once knew. I wanted to scream at him, to punch him, to do anything to make the hurt stop, but I knew nothing I did would change what had happened. "I loved her, you know," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "I thought she loved me, too." David shook his head, tears filling his eyes. "She does love you, Jake. I know she does. We both screwed up. I never should have let it happen. I've ruined everything." I stood up, unable to sit there and listen to him wallow in self-pity any longer. "Yeah, you did," I said, my voice cold and final. "You ruined everything, David. I don't know how we come back from this, or if we even can." He looked up at me, desperation in his eyes. "Please, Jake. I'll do anything to fix this. Just tell me what to do." But there was nothing he could do. The damage was done, and nothing he said or did would ever erase the betrayal. I looked down at my brother one last time, the man who was supposed to stand by my side through thick and thin, and I realized that we might never be brothers again. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him behind. I didn't know what came next, how I'd rebuild my life or whether I'd ever trust anyone again, but I knew one thing for certain: the life I once had was gone, and there was no going back. The drive home from meeting David was a blur. My mind was reeling from the weight of it all, the betrayal, the lies, the complete unraveling of everything I thought I could count on. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. Emily had been texting me nonstop since I walked out of the house, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Not yet. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house that had once been my sanctuary. Now it just felt foreign, like a place where my whole life had fallen apart. After what felt like hours, I finally got out, walking slowly toward the front door, unsure of what I'd find on the other side. Emily was waiting for me in the living room, her face tear-streaked and pale. She looked up the moment I walked in, eyes wide and filled with guilt. For a second, I just stood there, unable to find the words to express everything I was feeling. How could I explain the depth of my hurt? How could I possibly tell her how shattered I was? "Did you talk to David?" Emily asked softly, her voice hesitant, like she was afraid of my answer. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah. I talked to him." She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off, holding up a hand. "I don't want to hear any more excuses, Emily. I've heard enough from him. I don't know what else you think you can say to make this right." Emily flinched, but didn't back down. "I'm not trying to make excuses," she said quietly. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've destroyed your trust in me. But Jake, I love you. I want to try and fix this. I'll do anything." The words sounded so hollow. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that we could somehow piece our lives back together, but deep down, I wasn't sure it was possible. The pain was too raw, the betrayal too deep. How could I ever look at her the same way again? "I don't know if I can do this," I said finally, my voice cracking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Emily." Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a step toward me. "I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I want to earn it back. Please, Jake, don't give up on us." I shook my head, taking a step back. "I don't even know who you are anymore. You and David, how could you do this to me? To us?" Emily broke down sobbing, sinking to her knees on the floor. I was weak. I let myself get swept up in something that never should have happened. But it was a mistake, Jake. A horrible, horrible mistake. I watched her for a moment, feeling the weight of her words, but they didn't lift the burden from my heart. They didn't erase what she had done. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a void, not sure whether to jump or walk away. "I need time," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to figure out if I can even forgive you. Right now, I don't know if that's possible." Emily looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever find it in myself to move past this, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But for now, all I could do was take one step at a time. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes. Only time would tell if this was the end of us or the beginning of something new. But as I walked up the stairs, leaving Emily alone in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that some wounds never truly heal. And maybe, just maybe, this was one of them. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and isolation. I stayed away from Emily as much as possible, barely speaking to her except for the necessities. We still lived under the same roof, but it was like we were strangers now, sharing space but not a life. I spent most of my time in the guest room, trying to figure out what to do next, trying to imagine what life would look like from here on out. Friends and family started noticing the cracks. My parents called, sensing something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to tell them. How could I explain that my wife had slept with my brother? That my marriage was crumbling before my eyes? I couldn't bear the shame, so I made excuses, told them everything was fine, just a rough patch. They seemed to accept it, but I knew that wouldn't last forever. David, on the other hand, stayed silent. I hadn't heard from him since our meeting, and I didn't expect to. Whatever bond we had as brothers was broken, and I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive him, let alone rebuild that trust. Some bridges, once burned, can never be repaired. One evening, after another silent dinner, Emily finally broke the stillness between us. "Jake, we need to talk," she said softly, her voice trembling. She had been trying to give me space, but I could tell the waiting was tearing her apart. I nodded, knowing this conversation had to happen eventually, but dreading every second of it. We sat down on the couch, the distance between us palpable, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. Finally, I spoke, my voice rough from the weight of all I'd been holding in. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Emily," I said, my words heavy. "I've been trying to figure out if it's possible, but every time I look at you, all I see is what you did. All I see is you and David, and it tears me apart." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened, her face filled with sorrow. "I know," she whispered. "I know I've hurt you in the worst possible way, and I hate myself for it. But Jake, I still love you. I want to make this right, if you'll let me." I shook my head, my heart aching. "I want to believe that, Emily. I want to believe we can move past this, but I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Trust is everything, and once it's gone, how do you get it back?" She reached out, placing her hand on mine. I almost pulled away, but I didn't. "We can rebuild it, Jake," she said, her voice soft but determined. "It won't be easy, and it will take time, but if we both want it, we can fix this. I know we can." I looked down at our hands, her fingers laced with mine, and felt the familiar warmth that I had once taken for granted. I missed that feeling, the comfort of knowing someone had your back, the safety of being loved. But now it all felt different, fragile, uncertain. "I don't know if I'm ready to make that decision," I said finally. "I need more time. I need to figure out if I can ever let go of this pain." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll wait," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "However long it takes, I'll wait for you." I stood up, pulling my hand away from hers. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a while," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I need some space to think." She didn't try to stop me. She just watched as I walked away, her face filled with sadness and regret. As I packed a bag and headed for the door, I knew this wasn't the end of our story, but it was a turning point. Whether we would come back from this or go our separate ways was still unknown, but for now, I needed to be alone. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: life, as I knew it, had changed forever. I stayed with my friend Mike for a few weeks, crashing on his couch while trying to figure out what my next move was. He didn't ask too many questions, just offered his support, which was exactly what I needed. We drank beer, watched mindless TV, and for a brief moment, I felt like I could escape the storm brewing in my life. But no matter how many distractions I found, I couldn't shake the weight of what I was facing. The space away from Emily gave me a chance to think, to really assess everything that had happened. I replayed the events in my mind over and over: the betrayal, the lies, the tears. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it all. What Emily and David had done still felt unforgivable, but a small part of me wondered if maybe there was a path forward. I thought about my marriage, all the years we had spent together. Emily and I had built a life, shared so many good memories, and it was hard to imagine walking away from all of that. But the trust was shattered, and without it, what did we have left? One evening, while sitting on Mike's back porch, I got a text from David. Seeing his name pop up on my phone felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at the message for a long time before opening it. "Jake, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm truly sorry for what I did. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. If you can ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I hope we can talk one day. But I'll understand if you can't." I didn't respond. I didn't know if I ever would. A few days later, I finally went back to the house. Emily had given me space, not bombarding me with texts or calls, which I appreciated. When I walked through the door, it felt strange, like coming back to a life that didn't quite fit anymore. Emily was sitting in the kitchen when I arrived. She looked up as I walked in, her face a mix of hope and fear. We had barely spoken in weeks, and now the silence between us felt heavier than ever. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back," she said quietly. I set my bag down, not really sure what to say. I needed time. She nodded, standing up slowly. "And, have you figured out what you want?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. I've thought about it every day, and I still don't know if I can forgive you, Emily. What you and David did, it changed everything." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. "I know. I hate myself for it. But I'm still here, Jake. I'm still fighting for us." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "It's not that simple. I don't even know if I'm the same person anymore. You broke something in me that I don't know how to fix." She took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we can fix it together." The room was filled with a silence so thick it felt suffocating. I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so many years, and I saw both the person I had once trusted with my life and the one who had shattered it. Could we ever rebuild what was lost? Or were we just clinging to something that was already gone? "I need more than promises, Emily," I said finally. "I need to know that if we try to fix this, it's going to be different. That you're willing to put in the work. That we're both willing." "I am," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my next words. "Okay. We'll try. But this is the last chance. If you hurt me again, we're done." Emily's face crumpled, and she rushed to hug me, but I gently pushed her back. "Not yet," I said softly. "We're not there yet. This is going to take time." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I understand." As I stood there, I wasn't sure if I was making the right choice, but it was the only one I could live with for now. We had a long road ahead of us, and there were no guarantees. But maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something from the ruins. As I left the kitchen and walked upstairs, I realized that no matter what happened next, I had changed. I wasn't the same man I had been before the betrayal, and maybe that was okay. Maybe, in the end, this journey wasn't just about healing our marriage, it was about finding myself again, piece by broken piece. Weeks passed. We tried to be civil, tried to heal, tried to find our way back to each other. Therapy sessions, long conversations that ended in silence, and nights where the tension was so thick, we couldn't breathe. I'd sleep in the guest room still, but more often than not, I'd find myself awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if we were fighting for something that was already lost. Emily was making an effort. She went to therapy on her own, gave me space when I needed it, and tried to rebuild the trust. But no matter how much she tried, the hurt wouldn't leave me. The image of her and David together haunted me like a shadow that followed me everywhere I went. I wanted to forgive. I wanted to be the bigger person. But every time I looked at her, I couldn't forget. One night, I came home late from work. The house was quiet, as it had been for weeks. Emily was in the living room, waiting for me. She looked up as I entered, her eyes tired but hopeful. "We need to talk," she said softly. I sighed, knowing this conversation had been coming for a long time. I sat down across from her, the distance between us more than just physical. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice shaking. "I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through. And I don't know if this is working." I blinked, surprised to hear her say it first. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know if we're ever going to get back to what we had, Jake. And I don't want to keep hurting you. I see it every day, the pain in your eyes, the way you pull away from me. I don't want to keep putting you through that." I looked down, my heart heavy. "It's not that simple, Emily. I don't want to just give up." "I don't want to give up either," she said, her voice breaking. "But I don't think we're the same people anymore. What I did, it changed everything. And maybe we're just holding on because we're afraid to let go." Her words hung in the air, echoing in the quiet of the house. I knew she was right. We were both trying so hard, but it felt like we were fighting a losing battle. Maybe it wasn't about giving up, it was about letting go. "I don't want to hate you," I said quietly. "But staying here, pretending like everything can go back to the way it was, it's tearing me apart." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. And I hate that I've caused you so much pain. But maybe the best thing we can do for each other is, let go." We sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of those words settled between us, final and irrevocable. This was the end. Not in anger, not in hatred, but in the quiet realization that sometimes, love wasn't enough to fix everything. "I'll pack my things," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll stay with my sister for a while, give you space to move out." There was nothing left to say. We both knew what had to happen. The next few days were a blur of packing and quiet goodbyes. Emily left first, her parting words filled with regret and sorrow. "I'll always love you, Jake," she said at the door, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to find the right words. "I know. Take care of yourself, Emily." And with that, she was gone. I moved out shortly after, leaving behind the life we had built together. As I drove away from the house for the last time, I felt an odd mix of sadness and relief. It wasn't the ending I had wanted, but it was the one we needed. Life moved on. It wasn't easy, and the pain didn't disappear overnight. But slowly, day by day, I started to heal. I focused on myself, rebuilding my life from the ground up. I reconnected with friends, found solace in work, and, over time, learned to let go of the anger and hurt. Emily and I didn't stay in touch. We both needed the distance to heal. But I didn't hate her anymore. What happened between us had broken our marriage, but it didn't define who we were. We had loved each other once, and that was something worth remembering. In the end, the betrayal had changed everything, but it also taught me something important. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to let go. As I stood on the brink of my new life, I realized that while the past had shaped me, it didn't have to define my future. I could start again. And this time, I was ready.